We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Those words, those immortal words, were written by a young Virginian, age 33, named Thomas Jefferson. Those words changed the world. Thomas Jefferson lives in those words, and he lives here at Monticello. Why do people like this happen? What gives rise to them? And if you come to Monticello, you feel that contact with it. I know I went there as a youngster, and something clicked inside me that changed my life. And to be up there, and to think, here's where he lived, and these are the rooms that he walked through, and this is the view he saw. And this isn't a recreation, this is the real thing. Jefferson was one of the luminous minds of the 18th century, not just in our country, but in the world. And his bearing on our present day couldn't be greater. His championship of ideals as well as ideas, freedom of the press, religious freedom, and maybe most of all education, that an educated public is essential in a free society. That's the message at Monticello. Jefferson, unlike some others, never actually sat down and wrote an autobiography. His real autobiography is Monticello. You can walk around the house and you begin to see the man.
Thomas Jefferson was a gifted writer with an idealistic vision, and his words shaped America. They shaped who we are. Jefferson was also an architect, and at Monticello he expressed his vision of America. He drew every detail of Monticello. He made specifications to the 10,000th of an inch. Everything at Monticello is a metaphor for Jefferson's intellect and his curiosity. Jefferson intended the entrance hall as a museum, and it was the first such place in America. And in it, he had a clock because he was ever conscious of the passing of time. He was surrounded by maps because he was ever wanting to place Monticello within the larger universe. Jefferson was entirely committed to the success of the country that he had helped to found. And Monticello was his laboratory. Its paintings, its scientific instruments, its maps, its Native American artifacts collected by Lewis and Clark were all ways of educating Jefferson's family and visitors.
And, of course, his own inner sanctum, his cabinet, as it was called, which is his office and adjoins his bedroom, surrounding himself with what he loved.
Everything that you see reflects his interests, and coming here enables people to make that connection.
You can tell a lot about anybody by what they love, and you can tell a great deal about Thomas Jefferson at Monticello by seeing his orchards, his garden, his trees.
The gardens at Monticello were indeed an autobiographical statement of Thomas Jefferson. You see ever so much the head and the heart of Thomas Jefferson. On the one hand, you see the human or the personal Jefferson in the way he designed his grove or his flower beds around the house, or in the way that he used gardening as a way of relating to friends and family and neighbors. But you also see him as a garden experimenter, growing 250 varieties of vegetables and 170 varieties of fruit, keeping a garden diary called his garden book. And this garden book has enabled us to put the gardens back fairly faithfully in terms of their structure and the character of the plants that were grown in them.
This is the real thing. The same flowers that he grew, the same orchard that he had, the same vista, miraculously, is all there for us to include in our experience in our time, 200 and some years later. It's wonderful.
He looked at gardening as more of a scientist, and his curiosity, I think, was very much expressed in the way that Monticello became sort of an experimental station of new and unusual plants that came literally from around the world. Jefferson said that the greatest service which can be rendered any country is to add a useful plant to its culture. And I think this curiosity was really unbounded in a lot of different ways.
I don't know how many times I have been to Monticello, but I had always gone there and seen something I had never seen before and come away with something new in the way of an idea or a question. No one who comes to Monticello will not be interested in the slave system that made Monticello possible, as they should, as we all should.
Monticello was certainly a working plantation. It was a community. On Mulberry Row, you would have seen furniture being made. People worked in the mills. They worked in the fields. And for a large portion of the time, people worked in building this house. Jefferson recognized that some of the people who worked here were unmatched in terms of their skills. I have a real sense of the people who lived here. I know their names and I know their physical descriptions. But when I look around here, I can see their work. And I feel very proud of that. And I think that other Americans, African Americans included, when they come here and they're truly able to understand what took place here, I think that it'll also be a source of pride for them.
I feel very strongly that every American should come to Monticello because it is a tangible contact with that distant time and those vanished people who are all through our lives, whether we're cognizant of that or not. They are there.
Most people think of Thomas Jefferson in terms of his public career, which is natural because he was in politics for over 40 years. He held virtually every office, from being a justice of the peace here in Albemarle County to the presidency.
Well, they think of Jefferson in terms of that he was the father of the University of Virginia, which was founded on the illimitable freedom of the human mind.
But I think his most important contribution was his ability to articulate the highest ideals of the American people. After Jefferson's death, the family ultimately had to sell the property. In the 1830s, it was purchased by a remarkable individual, Uriah Phillips Levy. He believed that the homes of great men should be preserved as monuments to their memory. Ultimately, in 1923, the Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation was incorporated in New York City and purchased the property. And since that time, it's been open to the public on a regular basis. Monticello is the only home in America on the World Heritage List. Monticello is on that list with the Great Wall of China and the pyramids of Egypt. The mission of the Thomas Jefferson Memorial Foundation is preservation and education. We're here to save a finite resource, and now it's time to make it even more authentic. We want to restore all the spaces on the mountaintop so that they will be more like they would have been in Jefferson's time, and thus the visitor will be able to understand Jefferson himself.
I feel that each of us is responsible for helping as best we can to pass the torch, to see that this great American place and all that it embodies is preserved, saved, respected for the next generation. It's much more than just about a building called Monticello, as spectacular as that building is. It's about what's at the heart of the American spirit. Thomas Jefferson lives in every front-page headline story about freedom of speech or freedom of religion. Thomas Jefferson lives every time we send our children to our school system nationwide. Thomas Jefferson lives in our appreciation of the great architecture of America. Thomas Jefferson lives in the world of the mind and new ideas. That's at the heart of Jefferson's spirit. The presence of Thomas Jefferson is felt here as nowhere else. Thomas Jefferson lives here at Monticello.